Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest Chapter 181 is officially out, and this was a really action-based chapter that I fully love, as we get Gray fighting off Viernes, and in all honesty, it went a direction that I'm glad it did, because it's not falling on a usual trope we see in fights like this, and it looks like Gray is getting set up for a big moment in this fight that might actually be able to resolve things in a very creative way if it goes about the way I think it will. And if it does, Mashima would have redeemed himself with how he's been writing Gray, at least in terms of the action portion of 100 Years Quest, at least if things work out the way I kind of hope. But before we jump into things, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Now with that out of the way, let's just jump right into the chapter. Chapter 181 of 100 Years Quest, titled The Potential of Ice. Cover image, Leon in front of a castle. Not much else, just nice to see Leon again. But we begin the chapter directly from the last one, after Carla ends up smashing the giant dragon Lacrima that Wendy managed to separate from Seline. And as this happens and the Lacrima shatters, Seline falls on the ground, and instantly the influence of the Lacrima ends up fading away from her, as she instantly recognizes Wendy as she's wondering what happened. As Wendy and Carla essentially celebrate over the fact that they managed to get Seline back to her senses, but they'll have to explain everything later, as Gray is currently squaring off against Viernes, still in Demon Slayer mode, which thank goodness for that. But yeah, they're squaring up, but as Seline tries to get to her feet, she is incredibly exhausted, as it seems that she's lost a majority of her power. So it's very possible, at least from what I'm gathering from this, in order to keep Seline out of the fight in terms of plot reasons and all that, the Lacrima was kind of a big source of her power right now, and by having that extracted from her, it probably just drained her for a bit. Obviously, she will regain her strength as she rests and gather up Ether Nano, as anybody in the series does, but right now Seline is exhausted and out of the fight, which is incredibly unfortunate. Wendy and Carla try to go up and help Gray in the meantime, but Viernes in an instant creates a giant barrier, sealing Carla, Wendy, and Seline within it so they don't interfere. Because, as Viernes says, he is starting to enjoy himself right now. Seems to be expressing genuine emotion and joy over fighting Gray right now, which, you know what, Gray? Props to you. You're making a guy that hates humans and a guy that's just like casually doing shit just for the hell of it to show how strong he is. He's enjoying himself now. Why the hell not? That's already a bigger W than you've had for this entire season, if I'm being honest. But what's interesting is that it's not just a regular seal. Viernes made a magic blocking barrier, which means wizards can't gather up magic and they can't break out using magic seemingly. And it's incredibly complex, yet Viernes managed to do it in a single instance. As he explains that it was through alchemy, he turned the air around him into magic. Now, as Gray charges up to try and cut his fun short and slash against him to create an ice blade, he wants to finish the fight fast, Viernes ends up dodging him. As Carla confirms that the Lacrima is still within Viernes, his own Lacrima is still within him, and Wendy can't do a separation enchantment from within the barrier and from this far away. Now, I want to say something that I need to explain real quick. Viernes said he changed the air around them with alchemy into this giant barrier. Into magic. This actually makes a lot of sense, because based off of how alchemy in this universe works, you need some actual magic force or ether nano and stuff to be fuel for it. And Viernes is just using his own dragon powers to fuel his alchemy. But the fact that I actually managed to change the air into magic makes sense, because everything around, whether it be the air, living animals, plants, humans, anything in the world of Fairy Tail, there is ether nano everywhere. It's how wizards refill their magic, it's how they end up using spells, that's how the world works. And so Viernes, on such a precise level, was able to turn the ether nano and use that to turn the air into that barrier. It is insane. It's such a microscopic level that precision is insane to think about. And I'm kind of glad we're getting more creative with the use of alchemy now that it's been fully introduced and is being further explored in Fairy Tail through Viernes right now. I love it. It's making this a lot more tense and a lot more interesting. Gray tries to launch another ice attack on Viernes, as he says, "I'll leave you powerless right now," as a giant ice shard just explodes out from Viernes from the slash attack. But Viernes isn't fazed by it, as now he's identified that Gray's ice is a combination of ice and dark magic, and that magic didn't exist 400 years ago, this particular type. And Viernes said that now he's learned its nature now, as not only the ice begins to shatter around Viernes, but Viernes also manages to make it disintegrate. As he says, "That won't work on me anymore." Gray punches Viernes, encasing him in ice, but in an instant the ice evaporates and shatters, as Gray tries to continuously hit him with a barrage of attacks to continuously freeze him in a giant block of ice, but Viernes just keeps breaking through it, saying that he can now block all kinds of magic, as he is a metal dragon, which I really hate that he is, in the official translation, the metal dragon, because he is the gold dragon. I don't see how that makes it so that he can block all kinds of magic. Is that like a lore reason for some cultures that gold is pure and nothing affects it? Let me know in the comments just in case of anything. But I really hate that he's called the Metal Dragon instead of the Gold Dragon like he was supposed to be called, because, my lord, so many people misinterpret it to the point where they think Gagio will be able to do something against Viernes because he's quote-unquote metal. I say this all the time, but it is just a stupidly bad translation that they refuse to fix. But Gray, after mulling over everything that's happened, he says that Natsu managed to beat this guy with his fire, thinking back to when Natsu managed to win. Yeah, Natsu did have a more of an elemental advantage due to the heat his flames produced, but again, he was amped up in Dragon Force, plus with the magical power of literally everybody that was fighting. The members of Sabretooth that were there and all of Team Natsu had their powers placed onto Natsu, so that's mainly the reason why he was able to take on Viernes to begin with. And Viernes is dragon state, mind you. And he was weaker than how he is right now. Gray keeps thinking of the moment from Natsu burning Viernes and defeating him, as he keeps trying to freeze Viernes, with Viernes keep breaking out of his ice shards as he thinks his ice can't do anything. But he says, wait a minute, I'll burn ice like Natsu's fire, because I can, as he thinks of the Yonin Ur, as he says, cause I'm a maker wizard, as then he encases himself in a fiery looking ice, as he then brings it into himself, making that whole aura, like, not only freezing, but look like he's on fire, goes up to Viernes, hits him in the chest with a massive blow of ice magic that I'm just gonna go with the fact that it's so cold it burns, that he ends up encasing Viernes in a pillar of flame-looking ice. But that doesn't do anything, and Viernes breaks out, because Gray, after getting punched with Viernes, is told by him, I can block all kinds of magic. Because remember, literally, he said that he now knows how Gray's magic works, he knows the base nature of it, and with alchemy, he can undo it. So even if Gray did have something going with what he was planning to do with his ice, that wasn't anything that he could really do to beat him. Now I know people are gonna be like, oh, yada yada, made up bullshit about Gray doing his ice can burn him. I think Gray was more so going for the fact that change the properties so that it's so cold that it burns, because freezer burn is a thing. If something's cold enough, it can literally like burn off your skin, depending on the type of ice. And since he's an ice maker wizard, he could potentially change the factor of the ice. Plus, he has Devil Slayer ice magic, so he can do a lot more with it. I just feel like there's more of an exploration of what he can do with ice magic as a concept. This, I think, needs a bit more explanation as to how he's doing it. It's a cool idea, but I kind of feel like this part of the chapter with what Gray was doing need to be elaborated on a bit more. It's just going off of my base knowledge of how some things can work and potential of what Gray's ice could potentially do conceptually, but I can understand the complaints for it. At the end of the day, it needs to be elaborated a bit more. Gray is recoiling from that hit from Viernes, as Carla, Wendy, and Seline are lamenting the fact that Gray can't do anything, as now there's nothing that they can do to help Gray, and Gray seems to be out of options. But Gray grits his teeth, and he gets in a very familiar position, almost like he's about to enact Iced Shell. But Gray ends up letting out a huge yell, as then the area around them begins to freeze, creating an ice dome, as the entire area has been turned to ice. But Viernes is trying to tell him, you never learn. Your efforts are in vain. But as he goes to try to undo the ice around them, Viernes notices something's wrong. As Gray says, he froze the air, as Viernes is like, what? As the air begins to trickle around them. Gray says, thanks to the alchemy, Viernes was able to change the nature of the air around him. And as Viernes keeps breathing, we see little ice pricks come out of his mouth, like the solidification of the water in his lungs, or his breath, the liquid and mist vapor just freezing over and crumbling away. Gray says that with the air frozen, they can't really breathe. Heck, Gray's own lungs are starting to freeze up. Same with Viernes. As with a manic look on his face and a massive grin, he stares at Viernes as Viernes is freezing over, saying, let's see who can hold out the longest. With the chapter ending with Seline, Wendy, and Carla just looking on in horror of Gray's just borderline suicidal tactic. And that ends the chapter. Look, Gray is definitely going to have a big moment, because here's the thing, almost every big Gray moment, Gray basically tries to do something suicidal. Let's be honest, it's usually Ice Shell. It's always Iced Shell. But this is very creative, because this is making Gray win out of sheer biological logic, and using his ice magic in a creative way. He's not getting some random ass power up, he's using his ice in a way that will benefit him in the fight, but will also potentially kill him. Because as I mentioned earlier with how there's ether nano in the air with all the particles that wizards can end up using for their magic, and that's what helps refuel them, and how Viernes is using that in magical energy to freeze the air or turn the air into magic and create that giant magic ceiling barrier in an instant. What Gray is doing is a similar feat, if not a greater feat, actually, than what he did in Tartarus. Because in Tartarus, he managed to freeze a huge area of Bane particles, and those are very microscopic. Those are basically like dust particles, to really say, and those can end up infecting and sapping away magic from everybody. It's basically an airborne poison that saps magic energy to the point where people could die when they have literally nothing within them. This is an even bigger version of that, because Gray is going even smaller, freezing the literal properties of the air to the point where now they're basically breathing in just sheer ice. And that's no oxygen. So yeah, it sounds a bit nonsensical, let's be honest. It's a bit nonsensical, but it's something that he can do with his Devil Slayer magic, especially now that he's a lot stronger. He's doing basically what Viernes has been doing, but by freezing the air, Viernes wasn't able to change anything. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting way to go about things. It is a bit of a stretch with how Gray can do things, but it's not impossible based on what he's done with the Bane particles. So I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt, because this is him winning with his brain and not brawn. And now they're both on a timer, because I do think Viernes will be able to undo this eventually once he figures out how the nature of the ice freezing the air is. But with essentially the ether nano most likely in the air frozen, Viernes can't really use that to his advantage to use his alchemy, to use magic power as fuel for his alchemy, and Gray can't really use anything outside of his own magic power that's currently in reserves to fight. So it's literally a war of attrition right now, and I actually find this pretty interesting. And this would be a nice way for Gray to kind of win the fight and have a big, actual, meaningful win in 100 Years Quest, and it not be done by a stupid power-up or a random power-up, but with him winning by sheer logic and outsmarting his opponent, and using his magic in a creative way. So I'm liking this, but this all comes down to how the next chapter expands on this and how this resolves. So I'm leaving things off on whether or not this is going to be an overall really great thing until this is resolved, until this section of the conflict is resolved, because it's a decent way for Gray to beat a superior opponent. But for now, we just gotta wait and see. But what do you guys think? How do you guys feel about this chapter, Gray's realization of how he's gonna use his ice to beat Viernes in this war of attrition, borderline suicidal manner? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, and predictions, as well as how do you feel about this turn of logic with Gray potentially winning the fight or putting things on a more even playing field, and how you feel about Viernes now openly using alchemy a lot more in interesting creative ways. Let me know. And what's more, if you haven't already, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Now with all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.